Hey Patrick, thanks for joining me tonight. Wish it were under better circumstances, but I appreciate you reaching out. You shared the news with me earlier this week that our friend Gabe Walls had passed away, and it really brought up a lot for me that I wanted to talk about, and honestly, mostly positive stuff. And I want to just let people know kind of who Gabe was, what he was about, and how we both knew him. So don't have an outline for this. Going to be kind of stream of consciousness from us both, I'm sure. Why don't we kick off with kind of how you knew Gabe and when you guys first got together?
So Gabe, I started to get to know in the early 2000s. I was kind of coming up in competitive Magic, and he was already pretty well established. So he was someone who I kind of looked up to from afar for a while. And then, I started having some success. Our social circles started running into each other a little bit. And for whatever reason, he took a shining to me. So we started hanging out kind of as friends and contemporaries for a while. And Gabe was kind of like the early 2000s. You can speak to this too, I'm sure. With Magic was kind of this blend of Magic meets poker meets finance. Like there was a way that the culture was sort of all integrated into these like ways of making money or trying for these like people in their early 20s to like find careers and find success. And Gabe kind of spiderwebbed with all of that stuff. So in terms of him as sort of like a cultural like pillar of the period, he was like as emblematic as any individual that I can think of, on top of like we just got along well. We enjoyed each other's company, and we hung out pretty regularly for over 10 years. Like I was on the East Coast when he was in Indianapolis. I started working in game design, so I was traveling to events and seeing him. And then he lived in Southern California for a little while I was there. So, we were in contact off and on for a very long time.
Yeah, it was the same with me. I mean, this is like how a lot of our relationships are, and in Magic and stuff, right? You meet someone at a tournament hall years and years and years ago, and we had some stories in the pit, so to speak, right? Whether it was money drafting late after events, and it wasn't always Magic. Yeah, there was poker, there was blackjack, there was versus, there was Hearthstone. Over the years, it's been different shapes, different forms, and actually the last time Gabe and I got together was a couple months ago, right before COVID. We played tennis, and actually we had come up with a plan for. I'm kind of working backwards in time here, but whatever, who cares? We had come up with a plan to play tennis, twice a month, and he was getting back on his feet, and he was living in San Francisco. I'm living in San Francisco, and the place he was living is sort of a halfway spot where you have some freedoms, and he had earned kind of privileges to go out and do stuff, but he didn't have financial resources or full free reign. But so we were able to get together, play tennis. That I took him out to lunch, that sort of thing, a couple times. We made a plan to like, okay, we've played now 3-4 times. Let's keep it going. COVID happens, the lockdown happens, and that was really, and then we spoke a couple times over Messenger, but like I really didn't see him after that. I mean, haven't seen anyone, but to hear that he had passed away. So I bring that up first. Just I was going through all the different games and sports and stuff I'd play with Gabe, and it just really, I think I played basketball with him at some point. I mean, just who knows? But anytime you play with him, any game, any sport, any activity, super competitive, super sharp, and just looking to get one over on you just so that he could crack a smile and you could crack a smile. It was that kind of thing. Always. So I would run into him here and there, and the first look I would get, it would be that sly smile of like, oh, good to see you. Like, let's go. Let's go to war over on something. We'll figure out something to gamble on, something to play. And so I just remember that smile, that kind of that side of the. He might have been chewing on something at the time. He might have had his hat on backwards, and you'd see him, and you just crack that smile, like, hey, good to see you. Didn't need to say anything else.
Yeah, one of the things that really stands out to me about Gabe over the years is like his ability to kind of meet you where you're at. Like, I've watched him play against players who are less competitive, and like how competitive I am kind of toggles on and off depending on circumstances. And he was always like on the same wavelength with me when we were playing games or hanging out or whatever. And I also watched him. I'm not sure if you were ever at the Encinitas house when he was living there with Chris Benefell, and Dan Clegg for a while.
Mm-hmm.
that was a whole weird scene. I don't know
Yeah.
how much we were involved in that, but like,
Well, people who know that cast of characters will know it must have been a weird scene.
There was like a retired soccer pro and like these women in their 50s that were hanging out. Like it was a whole whatever. It was a weird scene. But anyhow, I'm watching him play these matches against. Like he's playing these matches against me. We're doing drafts of like Time Spiral or Ravnica or whatever, and like we're having a good time, and we're both trying to play well, but it's not the most serious thing. And then I watch him play against these matches against Chris Benefell, who's also an extremely competitive player, and just like how locked in, the trash talking, the like how mad one of them would get at a loss. Like Gabe could just turn that stuff on and off so naturally, and most people that I know, like they're just on the level that they're at, like they can't really toggle it.
Yeah.
And Gabe, I don't know if I would necessarily describe Gabe as like a high empathy person. Like it's confusing, and I know there's a lot of stories going around of like, you know, especially later in life, some of the circumstances, some of his behavior maybe not being the most commendable, but like he, I think, was a very natural at like reading people and being able to like connect with them like in the spot that they were at.
Yeah, I mean, reading people especially, but yeah, also I think for him, the competition was it was a real like he was living on a knife's edge in terms of focus level, and you know, with focus, with competitiveness. Obviously, like all of us who play something competitive or do anything competitively, you know, obsessiveness is right on the other side of that knife's edge from competitiveness, right? And you know, zoning out and focusing and zooming in, like this is all, they're all kind of related concepts where sometimes it could be toxic, sometimes it could be just simply focusing and having fun. With Gabe, I mean, for me, yeah, I know. Look, he was battling demons, and you know, he had stuff going on, and I know that he didn't always treat everybody in the community honestly in terms of his like business dealings and stuff. And I think that's just, look, if you've dealt with anybody in your life, and if you haven't, you've gotten extremely lucky. If you dealt with anybody in your life who's sitting at the intersection of these kind of substance abuse and mental health type of issues that we know Gabe was battling, and many people in our community are battling these types of issues. If you got someone sitting at that intersection, yeah, I mean, there are, you know, sometimes the conversations around money get weird. Sometimes honesty isn't always the priority. So, you know, let he who is without sin cast the first stone in that regard. I think we all, if we haven't been there, someone close to us has, and sometimes it goes that way. But I think Gabe at his best, he really was like just so focused and just gifted. I mean, at Magic, at all different kinds of games, so gifted. And that's why I put tribute to a gifted friend. I mean, he could just play the game both ways in terms of a technical precision. He wasn't missing who was winning the race, or like he could play technically, didn't make mistakes, didn't give games away. So he had that technical game, and then he had that next level kind of play the player, understand what's in your hand. He was playing, okay, based on this matchup, what's the likelihood that you can actually block here? Okay, so he would get 2 damage in that he wasn't entitled to get in. Like he had that too, not just like the technical ABC. And some folks have one, some folks have the other, but man, these kids who play on Arena, Magic Online, they haven't seen a lot of Gabe Walls. So I don't think they're on that platform. There's not enough, the interface doesn't let you get to where he was going, and so he was a really gifted player that way. I mean, what does that bring to mind for you when I go through that?
Oh, I mean, I've spoken about this before, like covering tournaments and watching like kind of players like consistently over the years, and I usually divide like the good players into 2 camps, which is I describe it as memorizing the notes or hearing the music. That like someone is often either like a really strong sort of ABC technical player, or they have a little bit of like creativity and panache in their game. And like you said, Gabe had both, like a high level of both. It's a really, really rare thing to find. And as you mentioned, I think like Arena is not necessarily the best like platform for developing those skills, because so much of it is just like this live game. Like you fiddle around with one card in your hand, or like I saw how you rearrange the cards in your hand, and that based on your first 2 lands means I think it's unlikely that you have a third land in your hand, so I can do X, Y, and Z. Like all these like little ways of picking up information that if you are a poker player or just someone who kind of like lives off of being able to read people and level people, that you don't necessarily get on the digital platforms. But Gabe was like, I mean, I really think that his results do not speak for how skilled he was. And he had a bunch of really good results, but he was phenomenal at both ends of the game. And it's rare to find one, and he had both.
And he gets mentioned in the conversation of like best limited players of all time, best drafters of all time. I think he deserves to be mentioned in that conversation. And I was driving when I heard the news, and I just kept thinking like he had it as a Magic player. He just had it, and it's that thing you talked about where if you were scared about what was going to happen the next turn, he knew you were scared, right? If you were feeling some, just some uncertainty around making that attack, like he knew that. He could sense that. The good players can. He just had it, and he was really strong. I mean, he had been, on the wrong side of those battles we talked about. He's coming up for air. He's in rehab. We get together, go to the local card shop. I don't spend much time in the local card shop because I always feel like a fish out of water just because I don't play casual, and it's just I don't know. I never know what to do when I get there. I don't because I don't know the people. Maybe if I got to know them, it would be different. But whatever. We go to this shop, so I haven't spent a lot of time there, even though it's right by my house. He hasn't spent any time there. We go there. I figure maybe we'll pick up some dual decks or something. We'll get to battle. It turns out there's a draft list going. There's 5 names. Okay, if we hop in the draft queue, the owner will join, and we'll have an 8-person draft. Awesome. We get in there. It's like core set, whatever. Gabe's never seen a card from the set. It's whatever the new set is at that time, a couple years ago. So Gabe drafts his deck. I draft my deck. The pairings break out. We're in different brackets. We both go 2-0. Right, one of us is red-black, one of us is white-blue, like these classic archetypes as they all are, and we meet in the finals of this draft. And again, it's that look across the table with that slight smile. Do you have it? What's going on? And oh, Mr. Sperling, are you going to try to pull one over on me with this or that? And not only is he like in the rhythms of that game, but he wins. I've drafted the set before. I know what the cards are from this set. I haven't drafted a million, but he's coming in draft 1, clean 3-0 through me, and he's giving me a hard time. Jabs. It's the trash talk is just A+2, so a gifted player, and he just had just multiple levels of it. And just I think certainly one of the great live limited players. I think he's one of the great limited players. Period.
Oh, and I mean, I don't know how much if you've ever played poker against him, but I played in a cash game with him once, where I fired into him on the river board of like Jack 10, 3 rags, and he folds Jack Queen face up, says Jack 10's good here, which is what I had, and I got up and left because I'm like, I'm just not gonna I'm not gonna wait for disaster to strike here. I'm gonna suck out of here and just get away from this action.
He was special that way, and Paul Rietzel sent me a Gabe story to read. And it involves them playing poker together, so this is a good time to read it, as good a time as any. So Paul Rietzel, friend of the channel, as we say, he said, summer 2006, and this is of course Paul, I was preparing for my senior year of college, playing very little Magic, knee deep in online poker. That said, there happened to be a Grand Prix and U.S. Nationals in the Midwest on back-to-back weekends. Gabe invited me to stay in his gamer mansion in Indiana for a few weeks to hang out, play poker, dive into the tournaments. Couldn't say no to the legend. So Paul describes him as a legend. Every day we'd wake up late, grab some food, hit the pool, then start drinking and playing poker tournaments. That sounds like a good idea to our to our listeners. We're gonna drink and play poker, but this is what we did for years. Gabe took a piece of me since I couldn't afford the stakes I was playing. So for those who don't play poker, took a piece of me means like if the buy-in is $200, a piece of me is maybe I put in 150, you put in 50. You get 25% of whatever we win. I get 75%, that kind of thing. So Gabe took a piece of Paul, and since Paul couldn't afford the stakes, Gabe was an excellent poker player, a natural, like he was with all games. One day, we'd been having a few beverages and crushing it. We were just cracking jokes, making a ton of noise, listening to music, drinking. Just a perfect day like you read about. I won a $50 freeze out for a few thousand and ran deep in another tournament, and Gabe was crushing cash games. So, feeling himself, he entered a $2,100 heads up S&G, so sit and go, just a one table tournament, $2,100 heads up. Nosebleeds even for him. I took 10%, which was nosebleeds for me at the time. Done for the day, I pulled up a chair to watch, and I only offered one half-drunken suggestion. Quote, we should shove the first hand. They almost certainly can't call, and then when you show, they'll think we're crazy, and then we'll have a huge edge.
This is 2006. This has to be 2006.
Yeah, so Paul writes in all caps, he actually did it. So Gabe shoves the first hand, opponent tank folded. So opponent thought for a while, then folded. Gabe shows the jack 4, and we're just going ballistic about how this guy doesn't know what's about to hit him, and they're going off. Okay, fast forward about 25 minutes of dead silence later, Gabe loses. He raps the table with his knuckles like he's saying, nice hand. He turns to me and he says, there was only one flaw in our plan. What's that? Paul asked. We actually were crazy. So he said we're going to open shove, show the hand to show that we're crazy. The problem is we're actually crazy. Then we fired a live cold snap draft and ordered pizza. That's the story right there.
Did you ever go to the house in Indianapolis?
No, I never made it out there.
So I got to go once during Gen Con. I was with Upper Deck at the time. And so I was able to go out early. And so Gen Con's in Indianapolis. He was living in Kokomo, which is outside. So this is kind of like pre-Uber, pre-Lyft. And so, like, I have an address, but I just got to, like, find a cab driver in Indianapolis. They don't have Google Maps. So I have, like, a broad sense of where I'm going, but I don't know the details. And I asked Gabe, are there any landmarks or anything that would help me know which house in the neighborhood is yours? And he goes, yeah, it's easy. Escalade with the back window completely blown out. That's mine. Because this was at the time where he was running a bunch of poker games, and I guess, like, so a bunch of gamers had come out to, like, work in the room with him or for him. And as part of that, I think he was, like, teaching people how to drive, or people were, like, driving the Escalade to get groceries and stuff. And someone backed it into a mailbox. And, of course, like, no one ever fixed the window. So there's just this Escalade outside the suburban house with no back window. And I go in, and it's testing for the Versus Pro circuit that's that weekend in Indianapolis. And so the house, I mean, it's like everything. It's like 15 people, cards all over the place, drafts are going in at all times. There's people who are, like, living there, and I'm not sure, like, are they in their room by themselves and they're sharing, or, like, is it actually, like, 4 or 5 people to the room? That kind of a setup. But it was so, like, as much as you look at that kind of scene and you're like, this is not healthy or sustainable, and it's not, and it wasn't. There are a lot of people like myself. I ended up going kind of a different path, but, like, a lot of people who graduated high school or maybe graduated college and were completely rudderless. Like, they loved a game, and that was what their passion was, and you want to make a living out of it, but also, like, how do you even do that? Yeah. And there was this community that formed around, like, because Gabe was kind of ambitious. Like, he wasn't just trying to game. He was running poker rooms and becoming, like, a recycling commissioner in Montana, and, like, who knows what other things over the course of his life, right? But, like, it did give a launch pad for people who have gone on to, like, good and stable and kind of normal careers, and, like, who knows if any of that stuff would have, like, you know, my opportunities to get my foot in the door doing something that was, like, a 9-to-5, something conventional. Maybe it was weird, but there was, like, a stability to it in its own way. Like, I needed those opportunities when I was 20 or 21, 22 years old, or else who knows what would have happened. And you can look back at that scene and go, like, what a mess. And it was, but, like, there are a lot of people there who I know are in a better place now, and, like, would they have gone completely off the rails if there wasn't a landing spot for them when this is all they wanted to do?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. I mean, you know, the whole thing about this, it all bleeds together, the good and the bad, right? You can't have that fun poker story involves gambling, and gambling has taken people on all different kinds of paths, and these long Magic weekends that never seem to end, and for some people didn't, and like this stuff takes you every which way. And yeah, I think Gabe was someone that honestly, like, he just put a smile on the people's faces that he was around over and over and over and over again. And I mean, I remember doing high stakes money drafts, and people be losing $1,000 on a draft in Magic, like a 2-on-2 draft. Someone's losing $1,000, and you'd lose it to him with a smile on your face, right? Mm-hmm. And he brought that kind of energy to what he was doing, and yeah, of course. I mean, some things got crazy, some things went off the rails, and like I said before, I mean, a lot of us were only a handful of wrong turns away from going down a similar type of path as that, and we just have to count our blessings that we didn't, and just be sorrowful that he did on some of these things. Like I said, gambling can become scamming. When you're playing poker with somebody, you're trying to take their money at the table. You're not that many turns away of logic, of actions, to then trying to do something, a little bit more nefarious. When you're borrowing money to play poker, and I've done it. I've borrowed money to play poker in a game I shouldn't have been playing, money I didn't have. I've done it, and if that had gone a slightly different way, I would have owed more money and had to do something else to get out of that hole or whatever. So I have a lot of empathy for, I think, just folks who are, like I said, are battling something and coming out of it, but remembering back to all the fun times that we had with Gabe, I mean, the fun times outnumber anything else 100-1 for me.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's just, especially like when you have this background in Magic and in poker or like day trading or any of these like kind of adjacent fields of like understanding, like you just make you're just like trying to make these 55-45 bets and catch the right end of it. But then when we like actually talk about the human beings involved, a lot of time the nuance gets stripped out. And I remember thinking that like when PTR died many years ago, about how like everyone wanted to venerate him as this like transcendental comedic genius and like charismatic force, or bury him as like a villain who did a bunch of bad stuff. Yeah, and it's like it can be both, and there's a lot of spots where like you said, the good could have been the bad with a slightly different term, and the other way around. Yeah. But like once someone's actually passed, it's like, what's the point of unpacking all of it? You know what I mean? Like you can just appreciate the laughs, the good times, and like my takeaway from this is like I know that he was not well. This was a couple of years ago. I was still living in Los Angeles, and I got a message from him on Facebook that said, Floyd Mayweather has kidnapped my girlfriend, and I need $100 to get her out. So there's a mix there, right? Of like, one, he seems unwell. Yeah. Because he and I were tight once upon a time, and if he literally just needed $100, he could have just asked me for $100. Yeah. It's like, if he pays me back, great, and if not, it's whatever. It's okay. And the other is like, the architecture of that story is so outrageous that it sort of signals that something is like... Yeah. So I look at my phone in that moment, and I'm just like, just close it. Like, what am I going to say in this spot? Yeah. And it's like, why couldn't have I said, are you okay? Like, do you need to talk? And it's been amplified for me during COVID, too, of like trying to reach out to people and just like check in, say hi, like call on the phone. I know it's like gauche and some people think it's rude, but like actually talk to a human being about some of the stuff, because like, my regrets in these spots always is like not being more empathetic, not taking 2 seconds to say what's up, not like checking in more frequently. And with Gabe, it's the same thing now. Like I know that it was tough for him. I know things weren't well. And like you can always talk about like your life's always full of the stuff. Like, I've got a job and a renovation and 3 kids. Like I have no end of excuses for not spending a minute or 2 minutes, but like could have found it. Doesn't necessarily change anything, but like actually, it's interesting. I mean, I did it both ways, and you can't not think. I mean, for us, of our generation of Magic players specifically, you can't. This couldn't happen, and us not think about PTR to some extent, right? This is another person who did a lot of the same stuff and who had an Escalade
that was in the shop the whole time. I mean, literally, like there's some weird parallels. They're like very similar, and both tragically gone too soon. And when PTR died, I wasn't on speaking terms with him, and I was the one, not picking up the phone, and I just kind of had, I wasn't in a spot where I could engage with him and have it be healthy. And then, and with Gabe, I was in contact with him, and I saw it both ways. And the reality is on that stuff, I mean, I think it is great if you're in a spot to offer something, offer it, and that's what I've tried to do. If I find myself in a spot where I can do it and be healthy and feel good about it, I'll do it. And talk to somebody or offer my support. If you're not, I mean, chances are the reality is people really, they accept and invite the support and help that they're ready for. And a lot of times, I saw Gabe a couple times where he wasn't Gabe, right? And I know in those spots he wasn't ready to accept help, even if I had done more to offer it. And in PTR, same thing, right? So I think, I hate to have you looking back with any sense of guilt, because the reality is, look, I think. I know you're a good person, and you've helped folks, and you'll help the next person that comes along, the friend that needs it. And if you're not in a spot to do that, then that's how it goes. But having seen it play out both ways, and it's just I think try to be that shoulder, be a kind of open door, right? We can't so much drag somebody to where they're trying to go, but you can have an open door, and if that person's ready to have a conversation, great. I try to do that, but it's tough. These things aren't easy. We know.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily know if I would describe it as guilt, because there is your efficacy, like how much agency do you have in this matter? It's like really limited in a lot of spots, so it's not that sort of a thing. But I know not to change the subject too much, but I've had in the last year some really significant issues with mental health. I've gotten a diagnosis for depression, anxiety, bipolar, and PTSD, and on top of work and family, it's just a ton. And I've had I had medication that was kind of working and then it wasn't, had to flush it, had a break, all this stuff. And not to unpack all of that, but even if I wasn't in a position to talk to someone about any of it, the times where my friends reached out and was hey, just lines open, that meant something. Yeah. How much did it actually change in the scheme of things? That's really hard. You don't have the counterfactual, right? So it's hard to know how much it actually matters in a practical sense. But I can speak from my own experience of it's easy to feel really isolated, or I think more pointedly that people only like you when you're useful. And I think for Gabe, someone who was had all these business ventures and was this social fulcrum for these circles. I don't want to speak for him, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if he felt when I was fun and when I was making a lot of money and when I was doing cool stuff, everyone wanted a piece of me. And now that times are tough, who's really around? And that can feel really lonely and isolating and sad. And that's I think my takeaway from all of it is try to just reach out, make people feel less alone, because I think it was especially isolating time, but it's always like that.
I think you're spot on, and I can tell you, I know that both lonely, recovery for him was both lonely and boring in a sense, and boring, and the boring part showed me actually a lens into something that games provide and gaming provides that I hadn't really thought about this way, because he was describing. So that's just what it was for him. It had those elements. It is isolating, and there is boredom, because he was, expected to sit in rehab, for example, and play checkers with somebody who's not a gamer, right? Or play Old Maid or whatever. It's and this is Gabe Walls, right? I mean, this is someone he's a brilliant guy, and in gaming, I mean, he could take things to the next level. It's just that was gonna be tough, right? And then and friends that had negative interactions. Well, they're out of the pic. People don't know how to interact, and you're still trying to get your bearings, and so it's really tough. And so I think if you find someone in that spot, I think like you said, letting people know that line of communication is open. If the person's ready for it, they need it. Your time is there to provide. If they need to have a conversation with somebody, that's so I mean, like I said, I can tell you he valued that, because it was something different and that he needed. So he valued those conversations that he was having with people, and myself included. And so, and I certainly value having had the chance to catch up with him. And it's sad just thinking about how we talked kind of optimistically about certain aspects of what might come next and that sort of thing. It wasn't just like this what was tough about it, and then the positive stuff just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah, I think like talk about like the gaming stuff selects for addiction, and then there's all this adjacent stuff like I think it selects for like smoking cigarettes and drinking too much and like a lot of other things. For me, I mean all that's been part of it, but a big thing for me is like a sense of adventure. Like there's a Grand Prix this weekend and I'm going to drive or fly somewhere, and then the next weekend there's going to be something else, and even if this event doesn't go well, there's the promise that like the next one could be good. Like there is this system that gets set up where your life is always really exciting, and like in many ways one of the things that makes me most fortunate or feel the most fortunate about having a family is having this like stability. Like my adventuring days are over, but like there's a different thing that goes on now that like requires day-to-day attention and focus and like carefulness and curation. I don't know what it looked like for me if like the adventure was gone and I just had to figure out a way to hack it, And a lot of what you're describing with Gabe is like that sort of that part of your life is either over or not sustainable, and how are you going to find a way to sort of grind in this like day-to-day way? And you describing like being in rehab and playing checkers and just sort of the contrast between that and like playing in the nosebleeds online or like playing in the top 8 of U.S. nationals. Like it is, I think it can be really like sobering in a bad way to sort of contemplate what, like you talk about like ex-pro athletes, right? Same deal. Like I play in front of 50,000 people cheering, and then I'm 4 years old and I got to figure out how to like.
Make no mistake about it. When we were playing nosebleeds, poker, or high stakes drafts, I mean, we were running from something. I mean, I really believe that. Like the way we were spending our time and taking risks. I mean, we were running from something personal. I mean, a lot of us, had a childhood where there was bullying. We were nerds and outcasts and all that. So I mean, we were running from something. So I know it was true for me, you, for Gabe, and we can go on and on about this, about our community. I think we found something in Magic that wasn't just a 10-minute chase of something that was an intellectual pursuit that was both like distracting in the right way, where we could fall into it and it would give us something to really chase, but that hole was just so deep. And then you with the friends that you made along the way, to use a cliche, I mean, it became something that is like a lifelong thing. I mean, I talk to my Magic friends, I don't know, 1,000 times more than the people I knew in high school or college or whatever. So yeah, I think I just have a renewed appreciation for all of that when I see how important it was on someone's journey and what happened when it all got taken away, where that person ended up in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines about Magic that's always resonated with the most is Patrick Chapin saying like he wrote this long piece about all the great things about Magic, and it's having Magic means never being bored again. And if you are someone with like issues with substance abuse, one of the worst things is the boredom. It's the tedium of like getting through the day as like a normal functioning person, And I don't know. It's how do you fill in the gaps from here? Like we talk about it could have easily been me, right? Like I got very lucky that my life broke in a lot of different respects, and if I just had to fill in the gaps myself, like without that sense of adventure anymore, and without something important to stabilize me, like I think I would have gone way off the rails once Magic was no longer an achievable thing for me, or I just got burned out from it, or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, whatever kept our lives on the rails. I mean, it's some mix of luck and other things we couldn't control. I mean, really, thinking of just the risks that people were taking, and just I don't know, the support system that we had. It really was just like it was like a honor amongst thieves, like kind of support system where we were all doing the same stuff, running in the sprinting in the same direction up the same cliff, and that was our support system. And then when it was time to transition into, back into regular society after this kind of growing up period, yeah, like not all of us made it back, and that's not the most shocking thing in the world. And not everybody made it back to kind of the normal 9 to 5 time to go put on, the button-up suit or the button-up shirt, or in your case, go work for a gaming company or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, just thinking back at those times, I mean, just so much mental ability, talent, and so many good times had. And every time it seemed like someone was able to kind of corral that and kind of just like, ride that wild horse into something positive. Like, they had a lot of success doing whatever that thing was. From our group of like highly skilled, super like obsessive players, so many people did that. But what happened if you put that saddle on the wrong wild horse and you rode something that was negative and down like an addiction type of path or whatever? Yeah, it could get really negative. I think so. That's what I mean by like that knife's edge that we were all kind of walking down. So I don't know. It's tough to hear about the conclusion for someone that we were so close to, that was so gifted in these ways, and he was just, nobody could ride faster than him in these games and any of these intellectual pursuits. He was just so sharp.
And I think part of like I think it's a positive and a negative is like you get to curate your circle in these sort of things. And so I think there's been times for me where like you can either like try to pull yourself up a little bit or regain some sense of normalcy, or try to like pivot to the next thing, or you can wallow in the like, this is what I want to be doing, or facing the real world or myself is like too challenging right now. And no matter where you're at, you can find people that are on the same wavelength and like indulge in wherever you're at. And like I said, like if the game design thing didn't work out, if I had never left New Jersey, like I think that I would have been able to craft a circle where it was like, yeah, we just game and drink and smoke, and that's just like what it is, and it all feels fine because you're around people all the time who are doing the same thing. But like you can't, it's like not an easy thing to extract yourself from at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, oh, for sure. I mean, look, it's like, these, especially as men, we're not given the full toolkit to handle a lot of things we're talking about. Whether if it's stress, if it's depression, if it's whatever it is, like we're not handed the full toolkit. And I think we're always that drugs and alcohol, quick fix, it's always there. I mean, you say, hey, well, this stuff we were doing was kind of adjacent to that. Well, it turns out like, well, if you're working too much, you might end up drinking too much. If you're working too little, you might end up drinking too much. It's like this stuff's so easy. It's like one of the coping mechanisms that we have, and we don't often talk to each other about how we feel. We don't often open up about what we're struggling with. And even I remember playing Magic, people haven't seen in forever, and getting home, and my wife will be like, "Oh, so what's going on with them? Like, how's their new kid? How's their like a new thing?" Like, and I'll be like, "Oh, I don't know. We just gamed all day. We didn't even talk about personal stuff or get into that. We didn't get into it, So I think like, I do regret that part about just kind of some of the friendships along the way. Where I actually was able to have those conversations with Gabe, as it turns out. But with a lot of these friendships, I mean, I think we could probably do a little bit better job of being supportive in a kind of different way, that as opposed to just being someone to game with, which is obviously that's important too. And we'll keep gaming. Nothing's gonna stop us from doing that. But I'd like to have some more conversations like this one and others that, kind of get past something that, again, I think the way men are brought up, it's just something that's not always easily available to us.
Yeah, it's definitely been amplified for me over the last couple of years. Like you can compartmentalize your life in this way where you're high functioning or you're professionally successful or whatever, and like having a family like lays it all bare, like all the ways you can't communicate, all the ways that like you handle stress or frustration in a way that's not good, and like you can't like run from yourself anymore, right? So there's been this like unpacking. I think if I was just in this circle forever, I could have just had this illusion of maintaining, but like it has like laid, the last 3 years have really laid, 4 years now have really laid bare to me that like I was under-resourced for handling like real human connection, real empathy, and it's like a work in progress, but it's like a lot of the stuff can get, and I'm not like trying to hand wave it. It is like, it did mean something. It still means something having these people and these connections, but like, if you can't actually pivot it into a conversation about what's happening in your personal life or like the feelings you're having or whatever, then like it's always on that surface level. And it's interesting coming back to these events sometimes where like you find the people that you're able to like move the past that and connect with. And when you pick up the pieces, when it's been a while and start connecting, that's the level you connect at. And you have some people where you never move past that. And that's all the conversation can ever be, you know?
Yeah, definitely. As I get older, I'm finding more of a lot of this other stuff that used to be a distraction. Now I'm trying to find a way to make it be kind of a wedge into something else. I mean, I don't know, just even like, you know, just like talking to my dad. It's so often about sports, right?
Yeah.
But if we, you know, again, this is more of just kind of like the I think it's, a lot of it is the way men are brought up is like you have free reign to talk about sports. So if I want to talk about, you know, racial injustice or something with my dad, like we end up talking about it through the lens of sports. We'll end up talking about Colin Kaepernick, or we'll end up talking about LeBron James's position on this or that. Like it's just one of those things. And same thing with so that's me and my dad talking about sports, and with my Magic friends, it's sort of the same thing, right? We'll talk about Magic Twitter, and this will be a way to talk about what's going on in terms of in our society, and you know who you're going to vote for and this and that. And it's kind of like, it's weird that we have to start in the sports or the hobby to get those conversations going and to form these relationships. But as I get older, I'm just like, I'm over like caring about that. Okay, whatever. It's an excuse to kick off a conversation, and then it goes where it goes. And I've thankfully found those deep friendships that I know I can tap for those longer conversations that aren't just 5 minutes about what deck to play next weekend. So yeah, I'm starting to value that a lot more than I used to when I was younger.
I think that the charitable read of that dynamic, and I know exactly what you're talking about, is like the feeling that you and the other person need the space to like ease into the conversation a little bit. But I'm kind of in a space now where I feel like it's more not being at ease, being vulnerable. Like if you ease into the conversation, then it just seems natural. But if you just immediately talk about your family or the protests or racial injustice or who you're voting for, it sort of evinces that like that's the thing that's ultimately on your mind, that the conversation didn't sort of organically land there. And even that sort of declaration of intent is like, it is a vulnerability, like, and it's not, you know, it's something that I don't think, I shouldn't say come naturally, because what does that mean? But like I don't think our society like necessarily does a great job of equipping men to like interact and be comfortable in that space. But yeah, as time has gone on, it's just like, it's okay to, I feel more at ease living that way and living with it. And anyone who I can't get on that wavelength with, you know, that's not a conversation that I need, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sad thinking about Gabe, and I'm just sad that, you know, when he burned a few bridges with his personal relationships, as addiction always does, it was isolating, and it's not easy. We don't have easy ways of building those connections anew, right? So he couldn't necessarily just meet somebody else, you know, and he, you know, he had to kind of go back to the Magic community again, where there was burned bridges and there was collateral damage there, that maybe it just had to be isolating, and it had to make things tougher. So I think that's why it's such a relevant conversation here, because I don't think, you know, the isolation that happened on his journey, I think it didn't have to be that way to that extent if we were all comfortable, you know, just being supportive of each other in a more open way. So yeah, I appreciate that.
For sure. No, I mean, that's the thing about like addiction. I think a lot of people attribute some of the bad behavior to like malice. And like my own experience with it is like, it's like talking to someone who's behind a pane of frosted glass. Like it's like you and them are a million miles away, even if you're a foot apart. And there's all these things, these barriers that crop up that make you like question their motives, or just like dampen these feelings of like empathy that you have towards other people. And I'm not trying to like hand wave all of like Gabe's bad behavior or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that if it's not something you have a framework for, you're like, I don't understand how people can treat other people this way. And it's like, because that's not the experience that's happening. That's not it's not that conscious. It doesn't have that level of intentionality to it. It's a different thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And right, I mean, there's no question. We're not sitting here to defend every choice Gabe ever made, every decision he ever made, every action he ever took. We're showing up and saying, hey, I mean, there was a lot to this person. We're all complex. Even the people struggling among us are super complex and have good days and bad days and good relationships and bad relationships. And for me, Gabe was always a really positive relationship, and he was just someone who would, like I said, brighten. I keep going back to it because it was just so true that he would just brighten up. That day that you saw him, for me, that was such a brighter day where I knew it was gonna involve me having to be at my sharpest to keep up with him in terms of humor and trash talk, and in terms of competitive play and caliber of play. I loved that, just trying to keep up with Gabe. He got the best of me more than I got the best of him, so I can't say I was always able to keep up with him that way, but man, I tried.
Yeah, well, my last little parting memory of Gabe was actually kind of my first. We played at Grand Prix Philadelphia, which was Onslaught Block Limited, and we played day one in the X and 1 bracket, and he played a Wretched Anurid. Very controversial card. I don't know if you remember this one.
Black and 1, 3/3.
Yes.
Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you lose 1 life.
Perhaps the most polarizing comment of all time in Limited. You had people who were like, this is an absolute bomb, all the way to this is unplayable. So he played and sealed, much sketchier proposition regardless. So game one, he plays it, and I make some comment on it, and eventually, I think I kill it, and I win this game somewhere down the line. Game two, he's on the play. He plays on 2, plays another one on 3, and just beats the shit out of me. The game is not close, and he is letting me have it too.
Yeah.
He is talking the whole way through. Game 3, he has it on 2. I have a pacifism, and that's kind of all. And now I'm kind of giving it back to him, but cautious, because the whole time I'm thinking Gabe's going to find a way to win this game. I'm not that far ahead, even though pacifying someone's Wretched Anurid is game on the spot. There's no comeback from that. And Gabe loses the match. Extremely gracious once it's all said and done. I go on to top 8 this Grand Prix. It's my first big tournament. He's one of the first people there to congratulate me, even though I am not even close to his caliber of a player, which he let me know as he was congratulating me on it. And it was kind of the sum of everything. He was a competitive person. He was extremely confident, extremely skilled, was aware of that he had these abilities, but was also in touch with people enough and knew that a player like me was going to have moments like that, not that frequently in my career, and just gave me the space to enjoy it, even though it involved getting lucky against him along the way. And getting that sort of legitimacy from one of the best players at the time, it meant a lot. And I think that if you asked him about it, he wouldn't remember any of this. It's just a random match, But for me, getting that sort of treatment from Gabe, being enough on the radar to get him to talk trash to me, and for his graciousness after it was all done, was meant a lot. It still means a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. The real trash talkers like that, they got it going, and then they understand after the game. It wasn't personal. We're talking about having fun, bringing out the best of each other in a competitive sense, and then he's in your cheering box. A couple hours later, I think that's a great anecdote about Gabe, and kind of if you were in his circle, I think he did let you know that he appreciated your company and he appreciated the competition. I think that's something that's consistent in my experience.
Well, I really do appreciate you reaching out to me to do this. I think I hate being in the era of social media types, but because it's whatever. But I do think that there is this instinct to try to distill someone down to 240 characters or a post, and just try to make a bold declaration, good or bad. It's
there's
we
people
all kind of live in the margins. I would like to think that our lives are worth a couple friends talking for an hour about it, and it's doesn't happen enough. I think hopefully it happens more, but I'm glad that we didn't try to unpack this in like a single post, and we
Yeah.
didn't come up in here with like a script for what we were going to talk about. Just like let it flow, because
Yeah. There's
you know,
no yeah. There's no saints. There's no saints or devils walking among us, right? It's just
no,
people, and and social media has got us so backwards a lot of time. People on there that don't know you and me must think that you and I don't like each other, right? Because
yeah, for sure.
even though we agree on 99% of stuff, what does social media do? It puts you in a spot where you end up arguing for 2 hours a week with that person about the 1% that you disagree about or whatever. That's just I think it is worth mentioning that some of the stuff that we miss from back in the day is just a lot of it's the opposite of what social media is. It's a deeper form of connection. It's building something that's not just a passing way to look cool in front of everyone else. And I don't know, social media kind of feels like the schoolyard most days, right? You kind of just if you get to bully somebody, and I've been as guilty of this as anybody, but I think that's where social media will just push us all to be that person. That's what it kind of does. And so it's good to have a conversation. I appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts about Gabe, or you think you've said what you came to say on that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's especially tough now because like we don't have the counterfactual as easily. Like one of the highest empathy building things is like being in physical contact with each other, hanging out and doing something that's fun, and like reconnecting. Like, oh man, even this person like tweets out some shit that like really rubs me the wrong way sometimes. Like when you get down to it, we're both people, we're on the same page, we agree about whatever, all that stuff. So much harder to do it now. I think like some mindfulness, some charity, some giving people some space, like when they need it, checking in on people. Like it's important to be mindful now. Like a lot of people are really, I think, isolated, and there's no end in sight. And I think a little bit of kindness and a little bit of like, evincing that you care goes a long way. I think it always does, but I think now more than usual.
Yeah, let's end on that. Check in on the folks you care about that might need a checking in on, and keep those relations. If you haven't talked to somebody in a while and it's a relationship you value, open that dialogue back up. And everyone at this point, we're all used to, hey, you want to hop on a Zoom call and catch up. So Skype, Google Hangouts, whatever you use. I mean, I think, hey, no better time than now in my experience. So we can end on that. I think that's sound advice.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Take care of yourself. Talk to you soon.